Hello, I'm Evan with New Life for Old Bikes. In today's episode, we're going to prep and paint Hillary's cruiser bike. Follow me to learn how to remove the decals, sand, and get this ready for a nice slick paint job. For the first part of my project, I'll be using a heat gun to remove the decals. You can use a blow dryer, but it'll take a little bit longer. For the second part of our project, we're going to need sandpaper as well as Scotch-Brite pads. I use 220 grit sandpaper for a nice smooth finish, but it also gives me enough tooth for the paint to really stick well. The Scotch-Brite pads allow me to get into crevices I can't normally get into with the sandpaper. I use a sander for large areas, and I hand sand when I get into tighter areas. If my frame were to be rusty or to have a lot of nicks and chips in it, I would use a rougher grit of sandpaper than 220. Probably use an 80 grit to start off with. Although cleaning the frame may not seem like a very important job, it's actually critical right now. We don't want to rub any of the grease or the adhesive into the paint. We want to remove it before we actually sand it. My degreaser of choice is lacquer thinner. It dries very quickly and removes the grease and the adhesive very, very quickly. Be thorough when you're sanding the frame. Any of the scratches you see here will show up like a sore thumb. They need to be sanded very smooth. The next part of my project is to fill the holes in the fender where the mount used to be. Unfortunately, I'm not a particularly good welder, so we're going to use some fiberglass instead. I'm mixing up the fiberglass resin, then I'm painting it on both sides of the fender. By the way, make sure that you put something down because this stuff is really, really messy. There we go. For the next part of this project, I've wrapped some 80 grit sandpaper around a paint paddle. The reason I've done this is so that I don't sand any dips into the fender. Once you've sanded the fiberglass to your satisfaction, go back over it with 220 grit like you did the rest of the bike. All you're trying to do at this point is sand out the sanding scratches from the 80. Once we have this sanded real well, we'll put a coat of primer on it to make sure that there are no scratches visible. Looks like that should be nice and slick when it's painted. A thorough cleaning, even on the smallest of parts, makes a big difference when you're putting this back together. I wanted to point out that using a drill with a wire wheel on it has its share of problems. It might be safer if you used a sandblaster, either that or a bench grinder with a wire wheel on it. After thoroughly cleaning my parts with lacquer thinner again, I'm taking a tack rag to it. This lifts any loose lint and dust that still remains. Just to ensure the parts don't have any rust come back, I'm putting on 2 coats of a rust inhibiting primer. An egg carton works really, really well to hold the small parts. After I do the first coat, I can flip the parts over and do the other side. After 2 coats of primer, I'm now going back with the finish coat, which in this case is satin black. One last wipe down ought to do it. Just want to make sure there's no grease on here, no fingerprints appear in it, no dirt. So let's make sure it looks good. This is a tack rag and it has a sticky surface on it. The purpose of this is to lift any lint off the surface. I've gone ahead and put a piece of paper in the seat tube and masked up the bearing cups. As soon as I've tacked this off, I'm going to coat the bare metal spots only with a rust inhibiting primer. Well, it looks like I pretty much primed the whole thing. Apply 2 thin coats of primer sealer for a nice even base for your color coat. Remember to read the label on your paint to find out the curing time in between the coats. Put a thin first color coat on, followed by a wet color coat. Follow label directions for cure time between the coats. Alright, first coat looks good. Make sure your first color is dry enough before masking for the second color. Normally, I put 2 coats of clear on, but sometimes I get carried away and put on 3. With 3 coats, I can wet sand and polish, making the paint job really, really slick. It looks gorgeous after 2 coats of clear. Thank you for watching my video. I hope you enjoyed it. Let me know if you have any questions in the comments below. And don't forget, like and subscribe.